Today's podcast is brought to you by HLA Productions. Join the conversation on family law, true crime, and more with your host, me, Heavenly Leanne Akers. Oh, hello. So today we're going to be talking about something quite interesting. And what I mean by interesting is we're going to be talking about narcissism. Now, here's the thing. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I know everything about narcissism, but I'm going to talk about my experience, what I went through, and if you have been through a narcissistic relationship, you will most likely relate to probably about a lot of stuff that I'm about to talk about. You know, it just never, ever, ever fails, right? That, you will be sitting there, you have your own things that are going on in your life. And then suddenly this person comes into your life and, they just seem like the perfect thing. And, about 3-6 months go by and then suddenly stuff starts happening and you start seeing like the lack of empathy, needs admiration, entitlement, the gaslighting, love bombing, manipulation. I mean, you name it, it goes on and on and on and on, and it never stops. And then at some point, I was getting quite a bit of comments from a lot of different people from the In the Hot Seat podcast, which is also What Really Happened podcast on Apple Podcast. And then the Hot Seat podcast is on YouTube. And that's with Amanda Solomon. And one of the things that I kept bringing up was the thing about narcissism is that when you are a victim of somebody with narcissism, you get broken down. And, and there was a couple of people that kept commenting, I'm not going to try to go back and try to find those comments because that's a whole lot. But those comments were kind of like, well, what do you mean? What do you mean about being like broken down? Well, let me put it into perspective. Okay. So when you first meet somebody that you are unawarely aware, that they are narcissistic, that they have narcissistic tendencies, and etc. In a lot of situations, like in my experience, the people that I've been with that have had narcissistic traits and attributes and things that they have done is they see somebody that is vulnerable, somebody that needs, somebody that is wanting to be loved, cared for, etc. And, even knowing I have a good microphone for some reason, my microphone is still picking up the airplane going over my house. But anyways, so in a lot of the situations that I found myself in, I thought, this person, gets me, whatever. Like we both have so much in common. I come to find out we actually had nothing in common. What it was is that they saw me, they saw my vulnerabilities, they saw the things that I like and the things that I'm interested in, and then they took full advantage of it. And then next thing you know, you're sitting there going like, oh, we're two peas in a pod. And then suddenly you find out that they know nothing about you. And so what it is like, I like to compare it to kind of like a leech, right? So like, it's not a symbiotic relationship. Like a symbiotic relationship is basically two entities that help each other. And in a non-symbiotic relationship, this is basically considered a parasite. And as somebody that has ordealed this, I will tell you right now that by the end of it, you are emotionally, physically drained in every single way possible. And at some point during this ordeal, you will be sitting there thinking that you are the problem. Because, there's a lot of deflection that happens with narcissism. And a prime example of that is, you get into an argument and you keep your cool, you're calm, and they just hit that button at the wrong time and you explode. And then suddenly that person's like, why are you acting this way towards me? And suddenly now you're the villain. Now, this is very common with narcissism behavior, is they push you and push you and push you and push you. And then once you explode, suddenly you're the problem. So some of the things that I pick up on very easily with narcissism behavior is the lack of empathy. And I found this out very, very quickly with, a past relationship of mine where it was like, if I fell, if I got injured, if I was sick, if I wasn't feeling good, it didn't bother them at all. They did not care whatsoever. And I picked up on that very quickly. Like, there was no empathy, no compassion whatsoever. It's kind of like a family situation that I'm currently in some ways going through at the moment. And, I'll give you an example. Somebody has, a family member that is inherently toxic and has a really bad history. And we're talking like substance abuse, homelessness, convicted, charges, etc. And this person lives in a household, with people that have children. And then the other person is just all like, oh, it's perfectly fine. It's fine. And the parents are going, no, it's not. Like, this is not okay. Like, you live with, you live with children. So I don't know why you feel like that's okay to allow somebody like that around children. Because, from my perspective, if I look at a situation like that, right, I'm going, okay, well, first off, the person that you're talking to that's allowing this person around your children has no empathy, no compassion for the fact of your situation, does not care about the well-being of your children or how this could affect them mentally and emotionally, or if this could potentially physically harm them, depending on this person and whatever they can bring around or whatever they do. And so a lot of people would be like, well, if you're the parents of these children and this is happening, then why aren't you doing anything about it? Well, there's only so much that you can do. Okay. So like, what do you like? And you can't expect everybody to be able to have the funds to just pick up and move and go do whatever they need to, like on a whim, like on a quick whim. Like, it just doesn't work that way. And so in a situation like this, like, it goes back to like what we talked about in one of our podcasts, which is, you don't want to be at failure to protect. So you need to be proactive. Well, here's how you be proactive. You can make police reports. You can take evidence, take the initiative to make sure that you're the first to voice your concerns, your worries, and etc. So then when you do have the ability to fix the situation, you know that you did everything that you could. Now, if something happens, it doesn't backfire. It doesn't come back on you because you can sit there and say, no, I was proactive. I did this, this, and this, and this. And this is now the result of everybody basically just not, seeing what I was talking about, example, But that's a prime example of what I mean by like no empathy as far as like dealing with narcissistic traits. Like, I'm trying to understand myself because even like with some of my closest friends, like when we talk about, our example, I'll bring up Jillian. Hi, Jillian. Jillian and I, we've had several conversations about narcissism, and the term narcissist gets thrown around quite a bit. I mean, it is nowadays, it gets thrown around a lot. And it's become more of an insult now than it has been anything of like, this is an actual medical diagnosis. It is in the DSM-5, which, if you don't know what the DSM-5 is, it is a book for psychiatrists and like people. Anyways, so yeah, it's a book for psychiatrists and people that are going for basically psych degrees and et cetera. And all attorneys also have psychological degrees as well. And the DSM-5 is something that is very valuable. So it's a medical, like it's an actual psychological thing. And so when we're throwing around the term narcissist, and let's say somebody's not a narcissist, right? Like, and let's say they get into an argument with like a friend or a coworker or whatever, and somebody's just like, well, you're being a narcissist. Well, do you not understand that like turning around and making a medical diagnosis into an insult is inherently damaging to one's like psyche, right? So like you're inherently making them question. For me, if somebody were to call anybody a narcissist, my thought is, are you trying to get them to question their behavior? That's my thought, right? But then most people have like these pre-notions of what narcissism is. And then there's other people that know what narcissism is because they've actually lived through it. So, you know, in my day-to-day life, you know, I take people for what they are and who they are until they show me who they are. Once they show me who they are, I'm not even going to bat an eye. I'm not even going to say anything. I'm just going to say, okay, well, I'm going to exit out of this chapter of my life. You don't exist because I don't have time for that kind of negativity in my life. I just don't. And, you know, if you're a person that is currently listening to this and you are dealing with this stuff and you know blatantly what it is on the face, just know that you are not alone, that there is resources. We all know that people dealing with narcissism, they will isolate their victims from their support groups like family, friends, siblings, etc. We know that they can be extremely controlling. They can have explosive behavior, extreme jealousy, and abusive in general. And, you know, if you're dealing with that, I implore you to, you know, reach out to professionals, resources, and etc. And get the help that you need. And, you know, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Just know that you're not alone. And there is a such thing as like, hey, like, you know, because there's been several times, like even in my situations where I've questioned, you know, after being with somebody with narcissism for so long, you start to wonder, like, is it me? Or is it like, like, at some point you start questioning yourself. Like, you really do. And it took me a while to realize, no, that's not the case. One of the things that I said in the podcast with Mandy was, there's nothing more abusive than watching your abuser pretend to be the abused. And that alone is terrifying, because as somebody that has, you know, myself or anybody that's gone through that type of stuff, you know that if suddenly this is blowing up on the interwebs and, you know, your ex, whatever, is taking all this to like social media and, you know, your friends and family or et cetera is telling you all about it. And you're just sitting there going like, what on earth? Like, you're not the victim. Like you started this whole thing. That's when, if you start to reflect on everything that you've been through, kind of like sit back and think to yourself, like, if your life was a movie screen and you could see this from a third perspective, and you start to realize every single little argument, every little bicker, every little thing that was said and done, and then you come to realize it wasn't you, then that's when the light bulb goes off, and you're just like, oh boy, like, yep, that was my light bulb for a hot minute, when I realized, like, oh, well, like, guys, it's the other way around. But anyways, no, I would love to talk more about this subject, but I want to do it with a special guest, and I think I have somebody in mind. I've known her for a while, so I'm gonna reach out to her and see what she thinks. But anyways, I hope that you guys enjoyed today's episode. If you have and everything, please like and subscribe and follow me on Apple Podcasts. If you know somebody that's going through this stuff, please share and send this with them. It's always good to have a second opinion or somebody to hear from. It's nice to know that you're not alone. Anyways, I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Ta-ta!